Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Eric Domros. I'm one of the counselors here at Mendon High School, and welcome to junior night, where we have an opportunity to speak to some students and mostly parents about this college process. We're also trying to simulcast through Zoom, so forgive us as we try to get this show going both online and live here. So we really appreciate your patience and we appreciate your attendance. What we'd like to do is to your right, my left is Vince DiGiacomo. Vince is another counselor, and he and I have been doing this for over 20 years. What we typically do in the counseling office is we split up the presentations. So we are on tonight for the junior nights, but rest assured, this presentation has been put together by our entire group, and we are in solidarity on how we approach the college search process with your children. So as we go through this presentation, it'll be a two-part. I'll do the first part, Vince will do the second, and then we will ask questions both live and we'll try to also entertain the chat room on one screen if we can, if that's possible. So again, we appreciate your patience, and without further ado, we will get going. Again, if you do not have a handout, there should be some on the back table there as you walk in, but it seems that most of you do have a handout, so we will get moving. So one of the things we've always liked to say here is college really is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. So what do we mean by that statement? It's our estimation and in our experiences as both counselors and as parents that the match is what's most important for your child with that school. It's not necessarily about the prize, and what we mean by the prize is what that name is. The name does not necessarily mean anything if there's not a good match. So the goal is to find that good match. And we will kind of go through some steps and how best to do that in this presentation, as well as some of the vocabulary that you guys will be up against as you go through this process. So here are the topics covered tonight. We're going to go through the Naviance database, how you do research, how you group your colleges according to a list, what you should think about on campus visits. If you have a child that has some unique circumstances like their music major, art major, something if they want to be an athlete at the college level. So what are those unique circumstances to think about? Vince will come in under testing. There's a lot of questions that we get on SAT and ACT testing. He'll speak about letters of recommendation. At the end, we'll finish off with what we do as counselors in the counseling office. And we'll do a brief touch point on financial aid. Financial aid will be covered more in detail at our college information night, which happens for grades 9 through 11 in March. It's that first week in March. And I think I've outlined it on the presentation what that date is, but it's on the school calendar. We'll do plenty of advertising as such. So finding that match. One of the things you need to do as parents, and this is at a time when young people are less likely to talk with you as parents. It's just coming of age. They've got a lot of distractions in their life. They're doing a lot of activities. Some of them have driver's license, so you're not seeing as much of them. So at a time where you most need to communicate in terms of things that they're thinking about in terms of college, is also the most difficult time to communicate. But it's important to do that. And it's kind of important to kind of go over those values. We'll talk about that in detail. We'll talk about research. We'll talk about how you list the schools. Again, we'll talk about campus visits and group schools. So how do you uncover values? What does this conversation look like with your child? And maybe you've had some of these conversations, and maybe you've had just part of these conversations. A good starting point is to start visiting colleges, and you don't have to go far and wide. You can start going to just some local schools just to kind of get a sense of what some values might be for your child to figure out what some of their values are. You don't have to go all the way to Penn State to see a large school. Now, you might want to go to see Penn State for Penn State, but you could just go spend an afternoon on a Saturday, go down the road to the University of Buffalo. That's got over 20,000 students in it. It's a quick visit, get a sense of the scope, the size, the resources at a large school. You could look at a medium-sized school. We've got lots of medium-sized schools in your community. In particular, there's RIT. It's a medium-sized school, and we have plenty of small schools. A Nazareth, a St. John Fisher, a Hobart William Smith. Again, I'm not saying they need to apply there. That's not my value. But what will happen is these values will start coming out. It's too small, it's too large, it's not far enough away. I don't like these types of dorms. I don't, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not getting the vibe, whatever it might be. Just that's a nice introductory to start looking at some of these values. Obviously, one of the big other values is distance from home. When you go on large car rides, there's a lot of kids that do out of town sports and athletics or music. Getting into a car every once a month for 6 hours one way, that's a long car ride. Can they do that several times in a semester? What's that feel like? We talked about the size of the schools by visiting some local schools. You also look at the location. Do they want to be, are they more of an urban kid? Are they a suburban kid? Are they a small town? What is it that they feel is important to them? Go to a Pittsford, go to a Buffalo, go to a small city like Ithaca. It's a very small city, but it's still an incorporated city. So things to take a look at. Other things that they should take a look at is majors and educational programs. So if it's a specific program that they're very secure about, something that they've had their goal, their mind's eye on, and something they've been thinking about for a long time, then you start looking at schools that might have that particular program. Most of those programs are what we call pre-professional programs. So very specific programs: nursing, physical therapy, pharmacy, occupational therapy, athletic training, those types of programs. Most schools will have a business program. Most schools will have a psychology program. Most schools will have a language art program. Some generalities. Most will have all the sciences, But if it's a professional program that your son or daughter have had some experience investigating and are really comfortable going after it, then put that in the search value. If it's not, and you haven't talked a lot about a major, your son or daughter does not have to have a major to attend any school. That is not an expectation. Don't make it as such if your child doesn't have an idea right now. That's okay. College affiliation, what do we mean by that? So college affiliation could be something like, I want, your child could say, I want big time athletics. I want to be a spectator. Then maybe they're looking at like schools in the Big Ten, or they're looking for schools in the ACC or big time Division I schools. Maybe it's important for you to go to a school that has some sort of religious aspect of it. It's important to your family. It's important to your child. That's an affiliation that you would want to take a look at. So again, that's at least a conversation piece. And academic reputation. What's important and what's valued by some families might be different than another family. One family might have a legacy at a particular school that they want to have their child also try to fulfill. That means that the name of that school and the quality of that school might be very important. But that's not necessarily the case for every child. An admission, the higher the admission standard, does not necessarily mean that it's a good fit for your son or daughter. And it doesn't make it a better school. Let me say that again. The higher the admission standard doesn't make it a better school if it's not a good fit for your child. Okay? Research. How do we do some of this research? Research now is so much easier to do, but some of the in-person research is some of the things that I'd like to highlight on this slide. Some of the things like college information night. For the last since the beginning of school, since September, we have had a number of colleges come to Mendon High School. Now, some of your sons and daughters and children have gone to some of these visits at Mendon High School. They've been well populated, which is great. But they'll also come in the spring, not quite as many, that's for sure. But they'll also come in the fall as your children are applying to some of these schools. So if your son or daughter has a top 3 school, say one of them's SUNY Binghamton, and SUNY Binghamton comes to Mendon High School, they come to visit, and your child does not get to that visit, I think it's important for you to go visit, for your child to go visit in the fall when they're on campus, because that expresses interest in the school. So if it's a top school and they're coming to your school, make sure your child is figuring out when to come and see them at Mendon High School's counseling members. It's okay that they're not seeing them this year per se, but it's important that they go and visit with them when they come to school. Every teacher in this building and every counselor has 2 degrees, an undergraduate degree and a master's degree. Most of the time it's from 2 different colleges. It's a great resource for your children to access. Hey, what do you know about Alfred? What do you know about the University of Buffalo? What do you know about the College of William and Mary? You know, those conversations, those relationships are important. We certainly pass it along from the vantage point of meeting with your children as counselors, but they can also ask any adult in the building for that. Friends of family, colleagues, whatever it might be. You might have a colleague that has gone to Binghamton. You might have a colleague that's gone to Penn State. What's that like? Connected to. Those are great in-person types of things to take advantage of. Naviance, you'll see, is the last bullet point. And Naviance can be accessed by every junior. And we will actually be going over, we're going to be starting junior conferences, individual conferences for an entire period. Each counselor will meet with their student. And within that, we will show them Naviance if they haven't already accessed it, but it's a great access point now. Through their Office 365 account, they can go to the applications and click on Naviance and it'll get them right in. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have parent accounts. So if you would like to access it, please just ask your son or daughter. We also encourage you to both look at it together because there's lots of information. It starts a lot of conversations. Do it together. So how can you use Naviance? You can use it by creating a college search. We would ask that your children keep their interested colleges in there. So you have a running list. Counselors can see it. So if they've done some work before the junior conference, if they've already visited some schools, it's nice for us to know it. We see that in their list before they walk into our meeting. So that's super important for us. It's got some great college stats, which we'll talk about as well. Here is the college stats. And this is a little, I don't have a pointer, but I can try to do it with my fingers here. So we've got on the x-axis SAT scores, and this could be changed to ACT scores as well. And we've got on the y-axis GPA. Okay. So all the GPAs have been updated in Naviance for your children. Okay, that's their sophomore GPA. They won't know their junior GPA until end of junior year. But they have a sense of where their GPA is overall. Now, the intersection of an SAT or an ACT and their GPA is what this represents. This represents American University. The green on this mean are kids over the years of the last 5 years that have been accepted. And the red are kids that have not been accepted. And the blue are kids we just didn't hear back from. Now, please, please, please be mindful that we have I believe it's the last 3 years, excuse me, we changed that. The reason why we changed that was the data has changed dramatically given COVID. The number of applications have gone up. A lot of things has changed in the landscape of applying. And we'll go over some of those things in a moment. But this is the most up to date. This is 3 years of information. Because it's only 3 years, we used to have 8 years of information. But because the landscape has changed, it's 3 years. Now, some of the other things you can do is you can look at the overall national statistics as well as Mendon High School statistics. But this is a means that you should start thinking about what chance my child have in terms of getting into that school that they have shown an interest, or that you have found on a list by the values you put into a list of creating a list of schools. Okay, you put the values in, the school comes up. What are their chances of getting into the school? You need to group schools according to safe, realistic, or reach schools. Safe, realistic, or reach schools. Safe schools, the schools you know based upon not only Mendon's data, but the national data that your child can get into. But it also, here's the tricky part of this. It also means that your child has to be comfortable at that school, that they could see themselves there for 4 years. I have a lot of students that say to me, "Oh, that school, it's on my safety list. I don't really like it anyways." Those aren't one and the same. If you don't like it, it's not on any list. So if you've been to that school and you don't like it, it's not on any list. The tricky part sometimes is to find that safe school, or we usually ask for 1 or 2, just to be safe. We're very conservative with our listing of schools. So when we go over that list with your child, we often ask them to add maybe another safety school, okay, just to be safe. Then there's realistic schools. That's where the majority of your schools will be. Okay, so say you're doing 8 schools that you're thinking about applying to. 2 are safe, 2 are reach, and then 4 are in the middle, for instance. Okay, schools that you are meeting that middle requirement of both the national statistics as well as Mendon High School stats. And then the reach, you're not far away from the Naviance data. You never know what else you bring to the table in terms of your overall portfolio. Remember that Naviance data and the national data, that's only measuring 2 things, GPA, and it's measuring SAT or ACT. It's not measuring everything in between, that nuance of what's important to many admissions offices. What does your transcript look like? How many courses have you taken? What rigor is that transcript? What geographic region are you coming from? What unique skills, talents, and abilities do you bring? Okay? All of those things cannot be measured on a graph, and it can't be measured on a national statistic. But at the same time, you still have to group these schools. So that's the only way to group them at this juncture. And between now and the time your child's applying is based upon statistics. We will help with that as well from the counseling management. You will see these decision policies: early action, early decision, priority rolling, and regular decision. One of the landscapes that has changed dramatically is that many more kids are applying in an early program. So I would say at least 85% of our seniors have applied to colleges already. And it's not even November 15th. That has changed dramatically in the last year and a half. So what are early programs? Early action is a non-binding program. That means a college offers an early action program. You can see, do they offer an early action program? Not every school does. But the ones that do say you can apply by November 1st or November 15th typically, and you hear by the end of December whether or not you've been admitted. And within that admittance cycle, it can give you 3 decisions, one of 3 decisions. You've been admitted, you haven't been admitted, or you've been deferred. Deferred means we want more information from your early application, which means you're right on the border, and we want to see your senior grades. So they push you to the regular applicant pool. That's early action. Okay. A lot of times, it's a good thing for seniors to do because it does give a lot of decisions by the end of December. And it helps emotionally, and it also helps you recalibrate if things don't go the way you were hoping they'd go, to maybe throw out some more applications before the regular decision deadline comes up. Early decision is a binding agreement. It's an early program, the same details of the deadline. So November 1st, November 15th, but it's a decision you and your child have made financially, and you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket that says, if I get admitted, I will be going to that school. So there's some risks involved. A lot of upfront research, a lot, which means all the schools in that top 5 or 6 list that you're looking at, you have detailed gone to all those schools. You've asked every question you can possibly ask about those schools, and one is rising to the top. And we'll talk about this at the end, you put in some average cost calculations to know that you can afford that school. Does early decision in a lot of cases help admittance? It does. For some schools, it might be a little bit. For some schools, it might not be anything at all. For some schools, it might be a little bit more. A lot of it depends upon how challenging their admission standards. And I can't give a generalized answer. All I can say is that early decision can positively impact an outcome. Rolling, let me just talk about rolling real quick. I forgot to talk about that. Rolling are schools like large state universities, often, for instance, let's just say Penn State. They have a rolling admissions program. As the senior year rolls through for your child, they can apply at any point, and they find out 6 to 8 weeks later whether or not they've been admitted. However, there's more and more pressure on kids to get that application in still before November 1st. And in fact, Penn State is now saying, we're going to give you a priority if you put it in before November 1st. Okay, so regular decision for a large state university, I don't necessarily recommend. We have some kids in the past, in the last year's class, where they were awesome students, SATs in the 1500s, and they didn't get into schools because they had already met their enrollment. And they didn't get into schools regular decision because they had already met their enrollment. So be mindful of these things. I hate to put any more pressure on anyone. It's just the reality of things that we need to get this process in a little bit earlier than we've ever done before. So I am going to turn the next part of this presentation to Mr. DiGiacomo, and he'll start talking about SAT and ACT considerations.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Now the air's got everybody really stressed out. I get to talk about SAT and ACTs. This is a difficult slide. I'm sure you're well aware that.
Mr. DiGiacomo.
No. Oh, I'm on Zoom. That's right. Okay. Try to stand still. So the trend is, as you know, many schools, especially last year, but it continues for this senior class, are test optional. It's not 100% certain what they'll do next year. The trend is to be test optional. My expectation and honestly, our advice for a night like this, or speaking to juniors, our advice is going to be the same. We can't tell exactly. Some schools have said whether or not they're going to be test optional. But at this point, for this slide, our message to juniors, we feel like they should plan to take, at this point, you're just planning to prepare and take these exams. And I think the preparation, we know, is it's a measure. The tests measure your educational foundation. So they're preparing anyway. And we would, most people would say, if you're at least in the Algebra 2 curriculum at this point, you're in a position where you're ready to take the test. There's a lot of ways to practice it. This batch of kids just took the PSAT. I'm sure you're well aware of that. It was during school, so we did have a really good turnout for it. That's going to provide some feedback for families. That's a practice test, preliminary SAT. We also offer, and I have a slide that talks about some of the test prep resources coming up here. But our message is really be familiar with the test. A college will 100% of the time when they accept it or require one of these tests, they'll take either one. There's all kinds of charts and things that we can share with students, or you can certainly find online that compare the two scores statistically. So our message to juniors is plan to take one of these tests. In fact, a lot of times we want them to take at least practice, set up an environment, a testing environment, or go to one of these places that offer a proctored practice test for both the ACT and the SAT. That's kind of our message. You can take that to the next level and do one official sitting for both tests, one ACT, one SAT. That's not necessary because you can provide yourself with access to these complete tests and you know, in a timer and a quiet setting. You can get a feel for which style fits you best. They are scored differently. They are formatted differently, but they do measure similar things. They're both achievement tests, trying to tell the reader where you stand compared to other people who took the test on that same day. So the message we give is to try both, at least practice both. Now, where it splits off for some students is if your son or daughter really wants to just take one of them, then after you've done the practice, they would have a feel for one or the other. In fact, they would have a score for one or the other. And if you sit down and have a conversation, okay, which one of these fits you best? Which one do you like best? Which format worked best? And statistically, which is stronger? Or which score do you think you can improve the most? And then what we'd love to see in these situations is take one of those tests a second time. Just like any other thing that you're doing. The first time brings with it some, experience. After you have experienced it once, you tend to be a little more comfortable. You tend to be able to focus your study a little bit more. So again, just to sum it up, we want to have a student distinguish between the two, take at least one of these tests twice. And at this point in the process, you're just taking those tests, you're looking at your scores, you're meeting with your counselor, and whether or not you submit those scores is something that we would talk about and strategize with senior year. So that would be how I would add, or that would be my message about these the test at this point. We have March, May, June, our spring administrations. There's 3 for both the SAT and the ACT. I think there's one in December, which we do not offer here, but March, May, or June, and then a whole nother set of 3 or 4 opportunities in the fall of their senior year. That's when they would take these 2. So March, May, or June for one, and then typically a second time is August, October, November for the admission cycle for seniors. Okay, so those are the opportunities to take them. Some people want to do it in March and June and have it done before the summer. Perfectly fine. These are things we definitely talk about in our junior conference individually with each student. Okay, we're getting into some of the other things that are important. I thought Mr. Darn covered the types of schools. Seeing as many schools as you can is a message we give juniors. One of the ways is through campus visit. These can be formal or informal. They can be virtual, which we all experienced an upgrade in the virtual experiences with COVID. When they were not allowing students to visit, they did an amazing job updating those virtual opportunities. I've toured done a lot of the virtual ones, and I think they're amazing. One of the nice things that being in person allows you to do that a virtual visit does not is see the other kids on the campus. Try to picture yourself being there. So we know these things. There's a lot of good examples on there of questions and things you might want to consider. Even some of these can even be questions you might ask either a tour guide or a representative when they do come to Mendon High School. That's such a, an advantage for kids. It's a really nice thing that our school and our teachers support. When the rep comes to our school, and our students get to meet with them. It's really valuable, something that can go a long way. And oftentimes those are the people reading the applications too. But I think that applies to that message of these questions and asking and experiencing all you can on the visit, whether it's in person, online, or with a rep here. There's some good questions on there. Here's the slide that talks about preparation. As counselors, we are most commonly talking about the opportunities that are free. We have some amazing resources for our students. Through Naviance, there's customized test prep software. By customized, I mean depending on how a student answers the questions, depending on their strengths and weaknesses, the computer adjusts. It adjusts the questions, it adjusts the level. Customized, it holds the answers in there, so it provides references for practice. It's a very good SAT and ACT. They actually have PSAT prep in there too, through Naviance, and it's included with the system. So that's a great one. Khan Academy is a similar model. It's free. It's just put out, and it's located on the College Board's website. Also very effective, especially for those of you that have students who are pretty independent. They're willing to do the practice, the resources, tips through the Khan Academy and through Naviance can definitely help their score. And then you've all some of you may have experienced this, others of you have heard of it, the range in price and format for test prep organizations out there. You can pay, hundreds of dollars an hour. You can join a class for, just a couple $100 through the rep department. Those are wide ranges there, and then knowing your child is super important in making these decisions. And as we move forward, and you find out if it's going to be required, these are points to emphasize. For example, we have, sometimes recruited athletes that, the coach has given them a threshold. That threshold is something you have to reach. Then, it may be worth your while to spend money, to dive into either one-on-one prep or, more professional opportunities. So there's a lot of variables here. This is just an example on this slide of some things that we, we share with our students. I think especially for that first time they're taking it, a lot of students can prepare on their own, take a shot at doing their best without the individual prep. Other people want to prepare. They want to take it one time and be done, but they want to take it back-to-back months, and all those are depending on family resources. But there is some great opportunities that are no cost to take those exams. Should be getting PSAT scores back right around Thanksgiving too, so those results should be coming soon. And with that answer sheet is an individual scoring board that is actually pretty useful. It tells you the type of question, what they got right or wrong, and shows you how far they got along in each section. So if they left things blank, when to guess, when not to guess. So there's a lot of information in those packets as well. I see the last bullet here. It says, what does it mean when it's test optional? I guess I kind of assumed people understood that in the admissions process. And the chart that Eric just showed you had SATs and GPA as the two data points that are most commonly used and known about colleges. Since COVID, we had a couple cancellations. They canceled the SAT. So colleges found ways to use more holistic review. It didn't require, they no longer required for a couple of years. And most of them this year are not requiring the SAT. So that's what test optional means. That's put some stress on students. That's relieved stress for some students. So again, those are individual things, but I just wanted to clarify that that's what that means. This slide, kind of gives you a heads up for some admission, some applications that require extra things. Music or musical theater are common to have an extra step in your application. The details, I mean, we're just introducing some of the nuances that college asks, the differences in college applications now. I don't have to remember all this, but to have a heads up on some of these unique circumstances is something that's an advantage. For example, if you're applying to, architecture school, they may want a portfolio that includes a piece of artwork, a photograph, some inspirational building. There's things that you can expect if you're going to apply to architecture that you wouldn't if you were going to apply for a history major. Similar to these other things, students who are doing musical theater or are talent-based applications or programs, they're going to go a step beyond the holistic of the questions that are on the normal application, ask for these extra things. The sooner you're aware of them, the sooner you review some of the criteria, the less stressful, the less last minute things feel. And that goes for athletes too. Again, the NCAA Eligibility Center is a component it's an extra layer of protection for the athlete. That says you also have to meet this set of universal criteria. It's irrelevant if you're not going to play a Division I sport. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but the message is, if you're an athlete, if you're a student pursuing one of these creative fields, if you're thinking about musical theater, if you're a student who, well, the last one is, similar, that if you have a special need or a special talent, another set of questions, another set of criteria could be coming your way, or something that you want to use to make your decision is coming. I made a note earlier when I was looking over these slides that a little bit of a trend I saw this year that I hadn't seen in the past was requiring kids to do a video, making it, sometimes it's optional, to do a video of themselves and submit that. And that has caused a lot of stress for students. They say, oh, just send us a 2 or 3 minute video, telling us a little bit about yourself. And kids are stressed out by that. Like, what should I wear? Where should I, what should I talk about? And they're always vague, like, oh, just tell us a little bit why you like our college. And like, oh my God, what if I say the wrong thing? So, but these are when you're taking away or making this test optional scenarios, creating, I think colleges are creating some additional things to be aware of. That's kind of what the emphasis there on this. Okay, another criteria in the mix, a couple more coming up here, is letters of recommendation. I'll give you the generic overview. Junior year teachers, preferably, at least one from a core subject, sometimes 2 from a core subject. Otherwise, a core subject and an area of interest if you have one, or an area you're applying to if you have one is helpful. For example, students applying to business, they might do a core subject and a business teacher. That's perfectly appropriate. Students undecided, or if they're not in a special area, two teachers from core areas are fine. We do try to encourage kids to give the college a little different perspective, maybe one for math or science, one from English or history. But again, we will work with students and make some suggestions. We'll help them with the language, how to approach teachers, and the logistics that go with how to get those letters to the colleges. A lot of that, I'm mentioning it now, it goes through Naviance, but it's something you can't really do till senior year, and this won't be the first time you're hearing about how to enter your recommenders into the system. We talked about a junior conference, we talked about it senior conference if they still have questions. And there's a lot of variations in there, right? If you had a teacher that's retired, sometimes that is in the mix. You had an interest, or you have a teacher senior year who you had sophomore year. That's absolutely an appropriate teacher to ask. So we do help them with that. And know that no teacher in Mendon or anywhere that I know of would agree to write a letter if they're not going to be able to be supported. They should decline. So we do work with that, and our teachers are well aware of that. They do a lot of this. It's amazing what some of these teachers who have had juniors over the years take on. and they do a great job. It's just a small part of the application. It just reinforces maybe a grade in class, or it does give the teacher an opportunity to talk about some of the student strengths or some things that maybe they struggled with and were able to overcome. So it's part of the application. Only two, we say that for a reason. It's not a situation where we want students to pick, to have 3 or 4 teachers that they ask because the resources involved, and then pick one for this college, one for that college. That's not really the way it works. It's 2 teachers would be the most. And then some colleges do restrictive. They limit it, which is stressful also. But we help them with that, and we help the students with that. They might say you can only have 1 teacher for our particular. The FERPA is, it's really more of a senior year logistic thing. It's filling out, it's giving permission to share. FERPA is like it's the waiver. It's like a HIPAA for medicine. You're giving permission. It has to be completed. Again, those are logistics of the application that we'll get into much more senior year. It is required, and students, when given the choice, should choose to waive the right to read the letter. That may be perhaps why that's in there. It lets the letter carry the most weight. Back to what I said before, they're not going to write a letter unless it's going to be supported. So, okay, one final extra criteria here, and it's the essay. It's also, it can be a stressful one. It's also an exciting one. This is sometimes one of the places in the application where the student can feel good about what they let the admissions office know. There's prompts that haven't changed over the years, that the student picks a prompt and then writes a 650-word essay. This is the traditional college essay that this slide's about. It is part of the application. Almost every school requires it, not all schools, but many schools do. And then what I tell students is not to stress, because the last prompt every single year is write about whatever you want to write about. So they have all these prompts that fit nicely into a lot of kids' experiences, and then the last disclaimer is like, or just write about what you want. So essays should let the reader know a little bit more about your son or daughter. They oftentimes it's the one chance to blend in their personality. Sometimes they pick an activity to highlight a feature or overcoming an obstacle. I love to read them personally, just to be, just to review them, and I'm checking more for, do I know the student better when I'm done, not the grammar portion. So that's an obvious thing that should be taken care of with an English teacher, or there are some examples in here. Pittsford Rec one is a great program. There's always a college night, one of the sessions on college night on how to write the essay. We help them as much as we can, but I think grammatically we would want them to rely on somebody, maybe from the English department, to take a look at that. It's fun. I love when kids share their essays. Usually they're pretty proud of them, and for the most part. The one thing I would do say from a parent's point of view is make sure, if your son or daughter is willing, is have you read them too, because sometimes the voice, or sometimes what they understand at 17 years old, and the way they might be perceived is not always the same as when you're 45 years old or 50 years old reading it and thinking, oh. So look it over, make sure that they get to know the student better, and have it checked over for grammatics. It should be their own work, of course. These are things that are pretty obvious, but that's, I think, what we want to cover in that slide. Okay, logistically, I think this is important to know, not the process, but the fact that all the information we have at school is confidential. So know that you can trust us, you can trust the system, that no transcripts, no confidential information, including test scores, none of that stuff gets released unless you or your son or daughter release it. It's no different for us. We can't not send a transcript anywhere. So anybody that gets this is the time of year I get those letters saying, hey, congratulations, you're qualified to be in the the national something that recognizes great students. And And I think, oh, they're like, oh, they know what my GPA is. They don't. They're not getting that from us. It's personal, it's confidential, and the only way that transcript gets sent anywhere is if the student and the parent give us permission to do so. The process for it, and it happens now, and I wrote down some examples of junior year, we are doing it. Some kids will take summer programs, apply for sometimes internships, summer experiences at college and look for transcript. There's a chance that a coach may ask for the school to send a transcript during the junior year. But again, we will not do, we'll give a copy to the student, but we're not going to send it anywhere without parent permission. So that's a little thing for you to keep in the back of your mind. If somebody's coming at you with this idea, oh, I know your grades are so good. And it's like, unless you released it, they're not coming from our office. So, and we'll talk more about logistics next year. The concept is you have to fill out a form, and parents have to give permission for that. Okay, this is the guidance side of our job. We give similar advice. All this stuff we're telling you, we share with students. College information at night is coming up. If you haven't gone already, it's open to underclassmen too. It's a nice event. It's kind of like a mini school day. There's 3 sessions, I believe, and I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 different presenters to pick from. It's here in school. You walk around and you're like a student. You got your notebook. You listen to these commissions reps from multiple schools, talk about essays or experts. So mark your calendar. It's on the school calendar too. But that's a great event. That's a large group setting. So our junior seminars, we actually, before the school year ends, all juniors will have started a Common App. We will create their account with them. We'll go into the class. One counselor goes to each class. We all have laptops. We'll start a Common App. There's things they can do in the Common App as juniors, and then there's things they can't do until they're seniors. We'll explain all that. We'll give them some of the basic data they need to fill out, applications. We show them some of the questions in the format. We're introducing them to the actual college application and many other things. We talk about letters of rep, we talk about testing, a lot of the same things we're covering here tonight. That's in a group. It wouldn't be necessarily with your son or daughter's own counselor. It's just one counselor goes into the social studies classes, and we give it a little bit of an overview. So it's really their first official time. And I know my kids did this. I mean, I'm sure they'll come home and tell you all about it, and how exciting it was, and you won't miss that for sure. And then in the fall, we do something similar to this. It's a little more logistic heavy. Like, here's what you have to do by this. And in order to get permission, you have to fill out this form and click this. All the matching the accounts, all those logistics really we cover in the fall again with seniors, and we offer that in person with parents. Okay, and then now this is really the slide that explains it, and you can see it on there. And I've been mentioning it all along. We go over with them individually. I'll have their transcript. We'll look at their course requests for next year. We'll talk about their specific plans for SATs and letter of recommendation, answer any questions. We'll make sure they can get into Naviance and understand how to get in through Office 365 with Naviance. So this is pretty much what we do. Parents can come. They're welcome to come. Not a lot of kids, not a lot of parents do, but it's great when what I prefer is I love the time with the students. If you have questions, especially if it's your goal list, you're certainly welcome to come, but if not, it's not uncommon. So don't let your kid tell you it is for students to come in with lists of questions. They come in organized, and the most organized students come in with a couple questions. Hey, my mom wanted me to ask this, or my dad wanted me to ask that. I love that stuff. I welcome it. I make them write it down. When they leave their junior conference, we make sure they have their passwords in their phone. I mean, this is stuff that we cover with them, and they're familiar with what next steps are. That's really common for us to write those things down. You're welcome to attend. We do set them up for students just because if we waited for them to set it up, it would all be in the last week of school. Okay, and then we follow all that junior work up. Summer hits, they visit, they finalize any tests, they do all, they may attend something summer-wise, like a campus tour or whatever they do over the summer. We regroup, we meet them in the fall. and cover it all again, okay? We understand that they forget things over the summer, new things have happened, we update our resumes, we ask for their input on their letter of recommendation, we ask for your input to write letters of recommendation for your children. That's a very valuable part for us. We appreciate the time that goes into that. We ask our kids to do it. Not everybody does it, we can do our job without it, but these are the types of things that are different between junior and senior conference. And then of course, Eric spent some time explaining the admissions policies. That's an important thing for us. If a student's not applying early, then we might ask them to do a rolling application or something that gives us feedback, because the process has gotten, the application numbers through the roof, higher than they've ever been, in part because they're test optional, but also in part because the environment has gotten less predictable. The data isn't there. It's so holistic and so dependent on what the school needs. It's very hard to know exactly without an admissions decision. So we spend a lot of time on that at the senior conference. And there in writing here, it just says, we write a letter of recommendation for all students. That's always the case. A lot of kids do ask us, which is great, but we will do it no matter what. It's a required part of the application. We evaluate the strengths of the program. We evaluate, and we're the only people really who speak from maybe growth or whatever concerns or whatever happens over the 4 years. We have a view that teachers have them in class with groups of people. We have, responsibility to just put the transcript in perspective, and so we are a required part of the application. Okay, this last slide is, was part. It's very informative. It's a part of the process that you can't get around. The finances are, for some families, it's the biggest factor. For some families, it's not a factor. We point out that there's the FAFSA is a required form. We'll talk about it way more as things get close. The concept will be to just be organized. Have which I'm sure you already have access to your taxes. Have an eye on October, November is the first time to do it. There's a couple forms, FAFSA, the one we all are familiar with, that's the federal form, it's free. And it starts, it's individual for each child. The profile and CSS profile is another form that sometimes when you're on these submission talk, they might bring up. It's more of a private form. It's for schools with typically with very large endowments that are looking at a few more things than the FAFSA covers. There's a little bit of a fee for that. And so just again, we're just trying to introduce some terms here. Net price calculator, this is an incredibly valuable resource. If cost is something you're considering, you can go on to every college in the country has to have one of these. You go on their website, you put in the variables they ask you, which income, investments at times. I don't know all the details, but and then they give you what you could expect it to cost within a very close figure. So if you're, again, if it's very cost conscious, you do the price calculator, you can count on that. They take into consideration all their merit money in the cost calculator. So, those are a resource that's out there. You don't have to go into the cost of a college blind. Okay. Merit aid, need-based aid, these are some of the more exciting things. Some of our top students at times can get lost in the process. They're applying and they're not hearing from us or not hearing from reps or not hearing from anyone that, oh yeah, you're definitely going to get in there. These schools are so unpredictable. There's a part of the process that, can make kids pretty stressed out. And where I like to, I know we all do, point out places that offer merit money. So, for example, a top student might show them, look, you qualify for their top scholarship. So, do you think you're going to get into that school? Yeah, absolutely. Or, hey, this school has an honors college, which means there's layers of people who go to this school and they would love students like you. So, some schools publish them. I was just at an event for Rockport, they publish them. Hey, if you got a 1300 SAT or 95 or higher GPA, you're going to qualify for this scholarship. Miami of Ohio, where my daughter had published. You get this score on the ACT, you're getting this amount of money. You might get other stuff based on your FAFSA, right, on your need, but you can be assured if you have this certain score, then you're going to qualify for merit or accomplishment-based money. Okay. We do have some resources, including a presentation from Renee Swift, recorded presentation that does, and she does a great job, way better than us. She was the financial aid person at Nazareth.
Just changed, like within the week.
Yeah, last week or so, recently just changed positions, but the presentation is great. And you can take your time, you can go back, you can soak it in, get your questions answered. At least that's a great starting point. We have a special financial aid night, typically where in the fall, again, that would be more of a senior day.
It'll also be, and college information night, Renee Smith will be presenting in March.
Yeah, that's a very well attended one of those sessions for sure. All right, the last slide, I think, is that's our contact information. The alpha breakdown is a little bit different by class, but we, kids know that it's all an infinite campus. We do, as Eric mentioned, we do share philosophies and approaches, work together pretty closely. It's not unusual for us to answer questions for any student if someone's not available, general questions. So, I would like to say that we are, we all consider it to be a privilege to be making this decision with you guys. Consider ourselves partners in this process. I want to tell you as honestly and sincerely as I can that, any question you have, if there is no such thing as, as a question you shouldn't be asking. This is confusing, it's overwhelming, it feels like a lot of pressure, but we definitely are proud to be part of the process, and we love parent input. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Email is the easiest way to, I know we will all pick up the phone if we're not with someone or we have, we have a second, but email, is a great way to find us. Phone is not always as easy. So we're happy to meet with you and answer any questions you have. And again, don't hesitate to reach out.
So at this time, we are going to entertain a few questions here in person, and I will also entertain some via the chat room. So, Mr. Giacomo, if you could be my eyes behind me for any questions, and what we'll try to do is repeat the question for the greater group and hopefully answer them. So you can chat away or ask here in person.
My kids need to be well-rounded. It's not just the grades. What does that really mean in college? Should they have great grades, but they should also play cello or do sport, or how much does that weigh in? The question is how well-rounded, if we think about that term, what does that mean, and is that always good advice? It really depends. And then you're going to have to get used to hearing that kind of response, because in some ways, I've heard admissions people describe it best, is they're making up a well-rounded class. So their fall class will be well-rounded. When they take into consideration all the people they accepted, the class will be well-rounded. Within that class will be some well-rounded students for sure, but there'll be some students that are not well-rounded at all. They have all these niches, all these needs, right? Some of them are athletics, some of them are certain majors, some of them are people who want to live in this type of housing, right? They have learning living communities. I mean, they have a list, and in the end, they will have well-rounded classes and they will have well-rounded students. But being well-rounded should never feel like an obligation, nor should the pressure of being well-rounded be part of the process. I think they're looking for kids to do things they love and represent how they want to spend their time. They're always evaluating how you spend your time, but I've never heard them say that they're looking for people to have checked every box. So would you add to that?
I just something quickly to add is it's always been my advice to parents that your child does in high school, it's their unique opportunity in life to explore and to explore their unique talents and gifts. Don't try to do something that you believe colleges want that is not necessarily a representation of what they want to explore. So, just follow your children in that regard, support them, care for them, and really follow them in that pursuit. But don't look for something, I would say, don't look for a prescription for college because there isn't such a thing. I have a question here online. Please explain the difference between early decision 1 and early decision 2, which is a great question because I did not point that out. There's a lot of nuances to this, to some of the things we talked to tonight. We can't possibly get at everything, but early decision 1 is typically by November 1st or November 15th, and it's an opportunity for colleges to try to get an early grasp of who's going to enroll in their school for the following school year, so it benefits them. But some colleges also offer early decision 2, which is typically January 1st or January 15th. That is for students who either didn't get in early decision 1 from one school, have been denied, and they want to have an opportunity at another school for an early decision agreement. And so they have an early decision 2 date in January, and those are for students who were not accepted in an early decision 1 date. You cannot apply to the same school. I mean, if you get denied once, you can't reapply, so to speak. So early decision, so say someone applies to Bowdoin College, early decision 1, does not get in. The question was, can they apply early decision 2? No, once you're denied, you're denied. Early decision 2 are for other students who have been denied somewhere else in the early decision 1 program. I hope that makes sense.
Or somebody who, decided the early decision was for them after November 1st. November 1st is early.
Thank you.
They may not have even visited the school, or maybe they met with somebody or saw.
Or maybe you fell in love with the school in December.
It's just for those people who are after November 1. And every year there's a new wrinkle in admissions policies. Sometimes it's early action, but it's single choice, So you're going to hear us say all the way through, you're going to have to read the directions, you're going to have to read all the nuances, answer the questions, and they will walk you through that process. Early decision, the key is, I try to tell students, that you've decided if you get in there, you're going there. That's the best way to remember early decision. Early action. Early action means you're taking action early, and the college is taking action early, but no one has to vote. No decisions have been made. The question was, what's the advantage of early decision? Well, I think because the college can count on you and your whatever you're bringing to them, whether it's whatever box you check for the college, they can ensure they've got that box checked off. Versus waiting till May 1st to see how many I could use anything sports related, like for example, they lock in their number of athletes, done. If they lock in their physics people, done. They don't have to keep searching, or they don't have, that doesn't have to influence the rest of the pool. They've got those things locked out. Ethnicity, gender, whatever the case may be. Yeah. Yeah, the question was, maybe could we give an opinion on the SAT optional? I think every year that opinion might be different. Because we're using the data that they give us that tells us if you're in a certain range. And I think this year, the advice the reps have been giving students is, yeah, you fall in our range, or if you think your score is in the upper end of this range, then of course submit it. And so it then leaves us to think, well, what if it's not? Are we, not going to get admitted? So it really is very individual. I think what you can leave here knowing our advice to students now is to at least try to get a score in the bank, like you may not use it, but your best preparation is now. You're in testing mode, you're in the spring of your junior year. You should get a test under your belt so that we can give you some advice or input or decide whether you should take it more than once, whether you're only going to look at test optional schools, or whether or not your score is a complement to your grade point average. Because it's not just about a certain school, right? If I'm an 82 average and I got a 1400 on the SAT, I don't care if the average SAT was 1450. Telling that kid to submit it because he scored or she scored so well relative to their GPA. So there's a lot of data and opinion and individual decisions to be made. Yeah. Oh, is the question whether or not they look at if they. No, it's optional. Meaning, if they give you an optional, they have a way of deciding whether or not you're admitted without using it. And if you choose to submit it, they will look at it. Yes, absolutely.
So, the student will work with the coach in here, in the school, or maybe like outside.
So the question was for athletics, if you think you're a recruited athlete, do you work with your school coach or a private coach possibly?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the sport. Track is one of the best in terms of recruiting. It is more concrete than most, same with swimming, right? Because pools are typically the same size and they can compare scores. Same with track. You meet a certain threshold for that school, and we actually have the students. The only, my advice is they should be driving the process. Other sports where it's a little, like maybe a football or something where they're working through your coach because it's only place they play is through school, then that would you are working in conjunction with your sports team. But individual sports, I think the athletes typically drive the process. There's a wide range of what you could do in terms of paying for something or working with somebody on a private coach who has contacts, but
especially with swimming and track, where everything's concrete. One of the things that your junior student can do is to go to colleges where they're interested in maybe pursuing intercollegiate athletics and look at, in this case, times to see how they might fit into that organization or that team. And if they are interested, they can fill out a student recruitment questionnaire at any school, Division 1, 2, or 3. And I'm not saying the school will immediately get back to you, but they're in a database. And then so when they follow up with an email or something further on in the process, they'll have your child's information in the database. One of the things I neglected, and I feel bad having my back to you, but I'm also trying to take care of the chat. And I put it on the chat room, a really good resource for any nerds out there who really want to find out the nuance of the college application process. And it's organized, I think there's like over 300 podcasts, but they're organized by certain aspects of the pod. It's called Tests and the Rest. It is a huge resource for figuring out the nuance of all things college applications, tests and the rest. Forgive me for not putting it on a resources page. I put it on to answer one of the chat questions. It's a great resource. It's a really quick, they're usually 20 minutes or less. You put it on when you go for a jog or on a quick car ride somewhere. You can really find out a lot of valuable information and some resources through that. Tests and the rest, it's actually done by a local guy. And I've actually been on it before. And that's not the reason why I'm telling you to go there, but I was on an early episode. So any other quick thoughts or questions? Yes. The junior conferences begin, and I should have stated this at the beginning. At the bottom of each slide, also there's a time frame of when things are occurring. But junior conferences in earnest will start in probably at the beginning of January. we get towards the end of the semester, it gets a little bit, we hate to take kids, too much of their time because of finishing up mid-year, grades, things like that. And then in earnest, February for sure. And sometimes March, but we'll start intermixing them in December when we start having a little bit more time. Some January, a lot in February, and a lot in March. So,
Yeah, and if a student needs to meet with us sooner, that's fine too. They can set up an appointment for, any reason, no problem.
great. I would say right now, I would say the vast majority, it's optional. But I would definitely have your child consult with their counselor, because test optional means different things for different colleges. It's not necessarily, it's a means to drive their number of applications up. And when that happens, guess what else happens? Their percentage admitted goes down. And so they look better.
And every
But-
college will put it on their website, whether they are or aren't.
They will, and that might be changing a little bit for your child's class year. Is there a resource right now because of COVID? There's not that I know of, but each one will have it listed on their website, and I believe they'll have it in Naviance as well. Yes. Typically, the question is, if they want to take a fall, senior year fall SAT or ACT, and they apply for an early action or early decision school by November 1st, will it get in? Most of the time it does get in. The colleges will tell you if they accept in October or not in October 1. The rare colleges that don't accept that. So when it gets to, and forgive me for not, I just want to point this out, and this will be the last words of wisdom here. We could keep going on, but poor Mr. DiGiacomo has been going, he's one of our football coaches, and they're working overtime these days. So he came right from practice tonight, so I really appreciate that, and I want to get him home. But the SAT and the ACT, there's unique opportunities for your child. I strongly believe they shouldn't be taking both. I think they should take one or the other, with the caveat that they take a practice test of one and the other. Practice. Do not enroll in both. Take one practice SAT, one practice ACT. Chariot Learning, a local place, they have an online instruction for it. They'll tell you where to get the sample test. You even do it online. He's doing less and less online and at the library because there's less and less kids showing up, which baffles me. But do not have your child enroll and take the actual SAT and ACT. They should take one of each, practice, see which one's better for them, and then just prepare for one. It saves so much time and energy and stress. So I'm going to leave you all with that. I appreciate all of our online listeners and watchers. Mr. Giacomo, thank you for your time, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. Appreciate it.